Gute Woche. Start of this year, and it's Motzei Shabbos, and meaning Motzei Shabbos to tell a Chassidische Maise. So I told you last week that I have a Maise related to the Reb Pinchas Koretze, and related to the, and I didn't want to tell the details last week before getting it, as you say in Yiddish, mit Hand und Fies, presenting it well. So the story is like this. There's a Melamed, lives in Crown Heights, whatever, in New York. His name is Avram Smith. And he would teach Aleph Beis in Lubavitch Yeshiva, which is the name of the school in Ocean Parkway. And he went into Yechidus one evening. I heard it from himself. He asked the Rebbe in Yechidus, as a Melamed, he was asking the Rebbe if he could make a change to the chart of the Aleph Beis to be able to test the children on the Aleph Beis. At first, the Rebbe said something, he was not very happy about changing it. And he, as the Melamed, he said, if there'd be any question of changing of the Seder, it would only be in the Nekudas, in the vowels. But they are in a particular sequence al pi Kabbalah. This, the Melamed, Rabbi Smith, he said this to the Rebbe. He knows it in the Shalom and the Zohar. There's an explanation of the set sequence of comets, then Pesach, and then Seder. And therefore, he wouldn't tamper with that. The Rebbe was actually very pleased that the Melamed was aware of the deeper significance of the Nekudas and the sequence of the Nekudas. But then he explained that what his purpose was when you have the children and you want to test them whether they know their Aleph Beis, they know it already by heart. But to be able to test them whether they actually know their Aleph Beis, he wants to be able to go vertically. So he wants to be able to go on the Aleph Beis chart, as you can see how I'm pointing. He wants to be able to go down. In that way, the child can't just say the words parrot fashion. But the problem is that in this chart, the bottom line of She and Si and Tov and Sof are not aligned with the other four rows of letters. And so the Rebbe agreed, okay, but this is his Yechidus. Now, I want you to notice the on the right of the screen, that's the picture of the set of Aleph Beis as they are in the Tilas Hashem Siddur. On the left of the screen, you have the set of Aleph Beis as they are in the front of the Siddur Torah Eir. To explain, the Siddur Torah Eir was published years ago, more than 120 years ago in Vilna, Tov Reish Mem Tes, but then it didn't have the Aleph Beis. The idea of having Aleph Beis at the beginning of a Siddur is a relatively modern concept, modern, 70, 80 years ago. And when the Rebbe came to America in summer, Tovshin Aleph in 1941, so one of the jobs he was given was to take care of publishing, and he prepared a Siddur, the Siddur Torah Eir, to be published. And the beginning of that Siddur, there is this page of Aleph Beis. Now, you note the difference between the layout of the two charts. We'll come to that in a moment. But when it came at a later stage, once Chabad had set up schools around America in various cities, and they needed to have a easy to use Siddur. For the children, the Torah Eir is good for Talmidei Chachamim, but it's lots of turning pages back and forth. It's for running a class with that, it's asking for trouble. And so that's when they published the Tilas Hashem Siddur, as we are familiar with. And it was perhaps at that time when this chart was made, or perhaps even earlier, because Merkaz L'Inyonei Chinuch published Sforim for teaching. Some of us may remember the Moed Kriya and the Sifreinu. And so this was part of the Merkaz L'Inyonei Chinuch publications, which was very much under the Rebbe's guidance and control, etc. At any rate, so Rabbi Smith tells me, was it a couple of weeks after this Yechidus, he woke up in the middle of the night and he couldn't sleep. So he washed Negelwasser, got out of bed, and perhaps said brachas, and he was drawn to the library, his library, and he pulled out a sefer from Reb Pinchas Koritzer. And this sefer is what you see on the bottom of the bottom left-hand corner. You can see it's the sefer Neufes Tzufim, which I mentioned last week. And he was drawn to this passage. Opened at the perhaps probably at random, but he saw this passage kind of, it can you say, flew in his face, where the Reb Pinchas Koritzer says the following: "But tzorach lodas b'ni, my son, you should know, sheyesh b'chof beis eisis haTorah, in the 22 letters of the Torah, there are separate categories: din v'rachamim, zochor and nekeva. There's judgment, there's mercy, there's male, there's female. Kenegdon, Aleph Beis Gimel Dal Hey Vav, Heim Rachamim Gemurim. The first 6 letters are absolute mercy. Zayin Chestes Yud Kof, and the final Chof, Hein Rachamim Stam. They are also mercy, but not as extreme. Lamed Mem Samach Nun Samach Ayin, they are Din Stam. And then Pei Tzadik, Enda Tzadik Kuf Reish Shin Tov, Heim Din Gomer. Now look at the chart now. Now that you've read what Pinchas Koritzer says, how there's 4 categories within the Aleph base, and now you see the first line in the Tilas Hashem Siddur is the Rachamim Gemurim. The second line is Rachamim Stam. The third line is Din Stam, and the Din, and the fourth line and the fifth line, okay, included is Din Gomer. So the distribution of the letters of the Aleph base is very precise. And the Rebbe told Rabbi Smith that there is, in the Yechidus, it kind of said to him that there's a kind of intimated, there's something more to it. So this is fascinating, where you compare the 2 charts of the Aleph base as it was in 1941, how it was distributed, and you can see the distribution is different. You can see it in front of your eyes. And here the Rebbe was insistent, and now what the beautiful thing is, that we just so used to seeing the Aleph base chart, and we don't realize that there are there's layers which we weren't aware of. Okay, let's go on to our next question. This was the story from Motzei Shabbos. Here's a fascinating realization. I had a discussion with someone in Shul this past week, and it's the following: you're sitting at a, let's say, I'm not at a Shalom Zocher or something. You had a revius of wine, Kiddush, whatever. You had a revius of wine, and you also had some beer or some lemonade. And now you made a brocha achrono al hagefen val pri hagefen. You made a brocha achrono on the wine. Now you want to continue drinking beer or lemonade. The question here is, does the brocha achrono cut off the flow? Now I think I have to explain something a bit clearer. Like bread, when you make a bracha on bread, you don't make a bracha on any other of the other foods which are part of the meal. Similarly, yayin, wine, is considered like a melech of all the drinks, and when you make a beir pri hagofen on wine, or if you were yotze the bracha of wine because you had a drink, because you're listening to Kiddush, so when you have a bracha, a beir pri hagofen, you don't make a bracha on the beer, not on the lemonade. They are all tough, they are all subsidiary to the wine. So this fellow was sitting at this Shalom Zocher or at a Kiddush. He had wine, had a beir pri hagofen, and because he has a hagofen, he doesn't make a bracha on the beer. Now that he made a bracha achroina on the wine, does that cut off the continuity of the bracha? And now he has to make a new shahakal new b'dvarei on the beer. That is the question. And fascinatingly, That's the halacha is not so. When you make a bracha achroina, it's a conscious discontinuing of the food with which you made the bracha. But it doesn't mean that the bracha has lost its effect totally. I was just thinking today, we're by Havdalah, just sharing my machshava zoros. My Havdalah, I made Havdalah, and so with Besamim, I made the bracha Besamim, and the family took the Besamim, and then I made Beiri Meir Ha'esh. Now, can the people who heard me say Beiri Meir Ha'esh, can they not say, can they not smell the Besamim because they've lost the bracha, because it went to the next bracha? Which is not true. The bracha doesn't, so that's what we were seeing over here, that the Beiri Pri HaGofen, even though he said a bracha achroina, and therefore there's a cutoff, he can't have wine again without making a new bracha Beiri Pri HaGofen, but he didn't discontinue in his mind to have drinking of further drinking of beer. That he can continue drinking beer. The thing is, to do so was wrong because it's causing a bracha she'eino tzricha. If you know that when you finish drinking your lemonade, you can make a bracha ala gefen al pri hagefen, and you won't have to make a ber nefoshes for the lemonade. So now that you did the bracha ala gefen al pri hagefen early, so you've caused yourself to have to make an extra bracha of ber nefoshes, which is to cause a bracha she'eino tzricha, which shouldn't be done. But if you did it, he would, as I say, he would not need to make a shahakol. When he's finished drinking his beer, he'd have to make a bracha achroina ber nefoshes. Take it further. Let's say if he had wine and beer, and also some potato crisps, and he had a shir kazayis, a potato crisps within a shir kriachilas pras, so he has to make a ber nefoshes in any case. I've finished with the wine. I want to continue drinking lemonade and potato crisps. I'm going to make a ber nefoshes in any case. So that's perfectly legitimate. So it's a fascinating idea that the bracha, which he said, although he made a bracha achroina, but the bracha continues for the parts which he did not disassociate himself from. Now, this brings us to a fascinating question, which probably no one gave it serious thought. But when you've eaten a few biscuits and you made a bracha achroina, then you realize there's a few crumbs in your mouth, and they're tasty. And then you swallow those crumbs. Hey, I eat it without bracha. The Torah says it's not a problem, because when you made a bracha achroina, you meant not to eat more biscuits. You did not disassociate from swallowing the crumbs in your mouth, and therefore they are included in your. They are still covered by the original Beir minimum size.
Dan,
let's move on to the next question.
Dan, can I ask a question? This bracha she'eino tzricha, but he's continuing to eat.
Okay, someone asked me over Chol Moed about doing an Opsher. So what you have on the lower right is from the Shulchan Aruch, Siman Tov Kuf Lamed Aleph, is the din of not having a haircut during Chol Moed, and the reason for the Isur to have a haircut in Chol Moed is Shelo yikonis leregel keshehu menuvel. Imagine you're very busy, Erev Pesach, you're baking matzahs, and Erev Sukkot, you're building the sukkah and the lulav, and you know, Chol Moed, you'll have time. So people would, Chacham didn't make gzeros in a vacuum. They saw people were doing this, and they were coming to the beginning of Yom Tov looking like tramps, with their hair all unkempt, and they were having haircuts in Chol Moed. So Chacham said, Shelo yikonis leregel keshehu menuvel. They introduced a new Isser. Just like you're not allowed to do Malacha in Chol Moed, they introduced an Isser to have a haircut in Chol Moed. Which becomes a very, very interesting twist to this. I heard this from Rav Efraim Padras, Refuah Shlema. Erev Pesach afternoon. I've got a status of Chol Moed. Yeah? So Erev Pesach afternoon, you're not allowed to have a haircut. Why? Because it's like Chol Moed. Why can't you have a haircut of Chol Moed? You shouldn't come to Yom Tov looking like a tramp. So it's out of Yom Tov. So it's out of Yom Tov. Now's the time to have a haircut. No, it's Chol Moed. So it's very interesting how it became kind of like a malacha, and therefore it's also even an Erev Pesach. Okay. One of the exceptions who can have a haircut on Chol Moed is someone who just got off the boat. He was traveling and there was no barber on the boat, and he's just off the boat. So he's allowed to have a haircut on Chol Moed. Someone came out of prison and there's no barber in prison. No. So now the Sharit Shuvah, who is a commentary on the Shulchan Aruch, he quotes the following: Ve'ayim began HaMelech, and he says, it quotes the same Began HaMelech, who says that you are even allowed to delay the simcha of tiglachas, the simcha of a Opsher to a child. You're allowed to delay it so that it should be celebrated during Moed, during Chol Moed. Mitzvah nami ikar b'kach. It's indeed a mitzvah. And then he goes on, talks about the minig of Rashbi, people going to Miron to do a haircut over there. Anyway, he says not only if the boy became 3 years old on Chol Moed or Yom Tov, even if it's earlier, but you want to delay it to be able to do it Chol Moed, you're allowed to do so. Very interesting. Generally, Bechal the Rebbe didn't have this view of delaying an Opsher. Everything has got an Eis Rotzen, and you do it as close to the auspicious time as possible. You don't delay it unnecessarily. But all right, that's what the Gan HaMelech writes. Now, before I saw this, what I'm going to share with you now, I was thought of the following. I noticed that there is an answer of the Rebbe here, which you can see, that we should not do an Opsher on Rosh Chodesh. Although you can say it means a full haircut and just whatever, and perhaps the Opsher is different to the min. But he says the poil is that there's Rabbi Yehuda Chosid says, right, so you shouldn't have a haircut on Chol Moed on Rosh Chodesh. And the Alter Rebbe brings him in Shulchan Aruch. And he says it's an element of sakana. And therefore you shouldn't do it. See, if you note that the Rebbe in the first part over here refers to the Sharit Shuvah, which we just read. So on the one hand, you might say that it's okay to do an Opsher on Rosh Chodesh, and yet the Rebbe says, no, you shouldn't do an Opsher on Rosh Chodesh, and you should do it, take kefil achar Rosh Chodesh, do it right afterwards. So I was thinking to myself, Rosh Chodesh is a minig. Not having a haircut on Rosh Chodesh is a Rabbi Yehuda Chosid. Not having a haircut on Chol Moed is a din in Mishnah, etc. So if you don't make an Opsher on Rosh Chodesh, how much more so you shouldn't make an Opsher Chol Moed? But it's lav dafka, and actually you can see here. This is from the Sefer Sheva Chabris from Rabbi Shmuel Horowitz, and he says that you are allowed to do an Opsher for a child on Chol Moed. The reason is that because till now the child wasn't able to do it. It's like the boy, he just came off the boat. Till now you couldn't give it, or he just came out of prison. Till now he couldn't have a haircut. Now he's allowed to. So that seems to be the logic, although the Gan HaMelech seems to take it even further. And he says he heard from Rabbi Grona, now Oliver Shalom, that the Rebbe had told people that they should do a Opsher Chol Moed, and he heard from one of Anash that Reb Zalman Shimon also told him to make an Opsher Chol Moed, which is very interesting because on the other side of it, I once was in conversation with Rav Kusil Forkash, the author of Chol Moed Kehilchosai, and he lives in Shalayim. He wasn't aware, as far as he was concerned, people don't do Opsher Chol Moed. But here you see that, the Sharit Shuvah says that you can do it. And here you're seeing Edis, that the Rebbe did give his blessing to do so. So there we are. Okay, let's move on. So we've had this discussion before about mezuzah for a porch. So as you can see here, you've got a front door and there's a small, whatever you call it, a small porch in front. And it's got also a post. So that where the number 7 is, or I'm going to point to where one might think where the mezuzah ought to be. So there's two issues here. Is this a stone structure? Is it a Tzuras HaPesach? I think it is. Although you could also argue it's just to hold up the shtickle roof over there. Well, I'd say it is a Tzuras HaPesach. But is it a separate entrance, or is it part of the one entrance? So I've mentioned a few times, I've used it, one of my favorites for him in Hilchos Mezuzah is the Sefer Seichel Tov, and he writes the following: Beis Shar Shalifnei Habayis. If they got like this porch in front of the house, the entrance to the house, if it's only just as wide as the so it's basically Pesach over. It looks like just a deep entrance. And if the depth between the two is 4 amas, then you'd have to have 2 mezuzahs. But if there's less than 4 amas between one and the other, one would see them all as one wide doorway, and you'd make only 1 mezuzah. And where would you put that mezuzah? We've gone through this before. You'd put the mezuzah as the narrowest point. And that's going to be, in our case, that's going to be where the door is, and where the door becomes a little bit, the doorway is a bit, well, you've got the door frame. So that's going to be the narrowest point where you walk through. And that's really the place where the mezuzah belongs. Okay. Let's move on. Here, from a different part of the world, a shaila. This is a shaila actually from somewhere in the southern states of the United States, and the shaila is the following: you have a bedroom, and a master bedroom, and after the master bedroom there is an ensuite bathroom. As you can see here, there's a shower unit to the right. On the left, there is a sink and a vanity unit. And there's also a little toilet, which has got a door in front of it. This little area then leads on to a dressing room. So we all know that you do not put a mezuzah on the door of a bathroom. The reason being that a bathroom is where people stand undressed, and that's not a respectable usage. And therefore, you don't put a mezuzah in a bathroom. The question here is, this dressing room, this inner room, is chayav b'mezuzah. It's a storage room. It's got more than dal damas square. It's quite large, as you can see a little bit from the picture. So it's chayav b'mezuzah. But the place where the mezuzah needs to be put up is in the bathroom. So what do you do now? Do you put the mezuzah in the bathroom, or? Now, let me explain another thing. I'm sorry I didn't put it on the screen. And that is, the correct place for the mezuzah is what we call b'chalal HaPesach, within the doorway. To put a mezuzah on the surface, on the outside or on the inside, comes into what's called achoyre HaPesach. It's not in the doorway, it's near the doorway. L'chatchila, that's not the place for the mezuzah. That is actually a big issue with the modern, these UPVC doors. Well, many people put in these installations, these metal plastic doors, and it's often very difficult to, there's no space where to put a mezuzah with Bechalal HaPesach, so people put them near because that's the best they can do. But here, so this question is dealt with also in a sefer on Hilchos Mezuzah. It's called Piskei She'orim by Rabbi Schechter, and he addresses this very problem. If the Beis HaKisei happens to be the entrance to the room, which is chayav b'mezuzah. So he says the Beis HaKisei, the first door, doesn't need to have mezuzah. That's obvious. And then he says you should put the mezuzah b'cheder hapnimi b'toich eisei hacheder. V'mandelas niftachas l'cheder hapnimi nimtze. So the mezuzah is going to be the Beis HaKisei. So he says you should put it inside and not inside the Beis HaKisei. So looking at the diagram at the bottom here, yeah? So we've got here, this is where it says Beis Shin, let's call that the bedroom. And then we've got this area, which is the toilet area. Now, true, I said that the toilet has a door, but the showers, the people don't get dressed in the shower. They get dressed and undressed in that corridor. So that corridor, although it's not the shower nor the toilet, but it is a place where people would stand undressed. And therefore, it's to have a mezuzah in a place where people stand undressed is not appropriate. And therefore, the mezuzah, is it playing around? Oh, here it is. Okay, there we are. So the mezuzah will be put inside the dressing room in a way that it's not going to be visible in the toilet area. So that's what he says over here. Although there are those who are questioning it, interesting, he has a lashon. He says that there's a particular. This is what he has from Avraham Pam Shlita, not like this Kutras HaMezuzah, who says you should put it in the bathing area with a double cover. He writes, it's a very strange thing to say, to put the mezuzah in the bathroom. And I saw further discussion of this, even though we have the idea of having a kiss b'toich kiss, a double cover, but that's good for an ad hoc situation. But to have a mezuzah, even with double cover in a place where people are standing naked, that wouldn't be appropriate. Okay, let's move on. Okay, here's another very interesting question, and I got this from a young man who's is interested in a particular topic, and there are regular podcasts on this topic. We're not going to deal with what the topic is because that wasn't the question. Let's say it's a legitimate topic, but the presenter is Jewish, not from, and let's say if he records a podcast on Shabbos, are you allowed to listen to the podcast? Now, on the other way around, you may remember the old records. It would say a little message not to be played on Sabbath and the holidays. Eli Lipska's records had this, and others. I once heard that this was an instruction of the Rebbe. Is it because then I'm singing, if I produce a record, then I'm singing in your house on Shabbos, or is it just that person should be Michal Shabbos? That's really, you can speculate. The question here is, let's come back to the basic halacha. If a person, there's a concept called Maaseh Shabbos. If someone cooks food on Shabbos, now if he cooks b'shoigig is one din, if it's cooked b'mezid, it's osuli oilam loy. For him, it's osuli oilam. But for the rest of the world, they're allowed to have it. But then the Ksav Sofer particularly deals with this question. The Moed Avraham says, if a person cooks on Shabbos, even b'mezid, he's not allowed to have it, but anyone else after Shabbos is allowed to have it. So what happens if you have a restaurant, which is a Yid, Rahman al-San, who's cooking on Shabbos, and after Shabbos you can go and buy it because it wasn't b'shviloi. It wasn't him; it was someone else. So the Ksav Sofer lashes out against this. He says, no, that which we say for other people is okay. That's only only if it's a one-off happening. But not if you have a pundak, if you have a restaurant which is working on Shabbos, to say after Shabbos, it's for someone else, that is not acceptable. This becomes a massive issue in Eretz Yisrael, for example, on the buses. To take a bus a half an hour after Shabbos, how did the bus get here in a half an hour after Shabbos? If it means that someone was Michal Shabbos, and he was Michal Shabbos knowing that it's the Isur Shabbos, so that wouldn't be okay. Let's take it further. What about, you see many Sforim, it has a notice in the front, Nitpas al Niyar, She'ein Boi Chashash Chil Shabbos. The paper doesn't involve Chil Shabbos. And I once heard a Shia from the Rav Aroshi, from Rabbi Yitzchak Yosef Shlita. He's talking about this, and he was looking more on a more lenient side. But this is a serious problem. You have a production. He went to the details of the stages of paper production. If it involves Chil Shabbos, so that person is Michal Shabbos, and because he has customers. So you can't be a customer of stuff which was produced for you b'chil Shabbos. So that's the background for this notice on the Sforim, that they wouldn't want to use a paper which was produced b'chil Shabbos. All right, that's ad kan if it was an isur min haTorah. If the violation on Shabbos was an isur d'Rabbanon, then there's more room for leniency. And this is the second quote on the left side of the page, also both from Pischei Teshuvos, where he quotes from Mishnah Berurah, if it's a Melacha d'Rabbanon, there is room for a bit of leniency. And therefore, coming back to this podcast, I would say that I don't know of an Isur min haTorah of making a recording. Nowadays, especially in the times of going back 60 years ago, when there is a letter of the Rebbe, he talks about the Melacha d'Oraisa. In those times, you had valves, or you had bulbs inside the. If you opened up a record player, you'd see a bulb there. They were poshet bulb. There was like a fire inside. Today, it's with silicon and the chips, whatever. It's to say that nowadays there's a Isur d'Oraisa is a bit difficult to say, and therefore we talk about Isur d'Rabbanon. There's room to be lenient. Let's move on. Okay, so here the question here is if there's a Beis Chabad, and some people come to the Beis Chabad, they have the Rosh Hashanah JFK. JFK means just for Kiddush. So the food, the Chol and the Kugel, this is a big attraction. It happens to be Beis Chabad, and someone forgot to switch on, or the plug was pulled out. So now is a predicament. There's not going to be hot cholent for the Shabbos meal. Is there a heter to ask a goy to plug it in? So now this is from Siman Reish Ayin Vov. And the Alter Rebbe brings here, there are places they do permit Amiru L'Nochri for lighting candles, so that people shouldn't sit in the dark. And some justify this because Amiru L'Nochri b'Mekoim Mitzvah is allowed even about the Melacha Gemura Shel Torah. Now, this is traced back to the Itur. The Itur, I believe, was perhaps around the time of the Rambam, perhaps a little earlier. And he takes the view that Amiru L'Nochri is instructing a goy is permitted even if it's for a mitzvah, it's permitted even if the guy is going to do a Melacha Gemura. So if it means to light candles so that we should be able to eat the Shabbos meal, not in the dark, so he says it's okay. You may know of some synagogues where the caretaker comes in Friday night and switches off the lights, and Shabbos morning he comes in and switches on the lights. And what's the heter? Well, that's the heter. It's the heter of the Itur, that Amiru L'Nochri is permitted the Tzorech Mitzvah, even if it's Melacha Gemura Shel Torah. However, in the third paragraph, which we have on the screen, the Alter Rebbe says, Kol Odom Tzorech L'Hachmir, one should not rely on this. And even if you're going to have to sit in the dark, you don't ask a goy to switch on the lights, or to light a candle so that you should be able to eat in light. You'll eat in the dark rather than, he goes on, because the ikir is that even for a mitzvah, it's not allowed to do and with a goy, it's only if it's going to do an Isur d'Rabbanon. To ask a goy to do an Isur d'Rabbanon, that's the term shvuz d'shvuz, that would be the permitted. But to ask a goy to do an Isur d'Oraisa would not be okay. V'divrei an ikir, the Alter Rebbe concludes, v'divrei an ikir, that the main psak is that you're not allowed to ask a goy to do Isur d'Oraisa, and therefore ein lohokil b'zeh afilu l'tzeir gadol, even it's a tzeir gadol, even it's a great need. In this case, I understand that people are coming, shouldn't be disappointed from the Kiddush. I don't think anyone's starving. but Mela, I don't see this. Anyway, even if it is, he says, even a Tzarech Gadol. Even a Tzarech Gadol, it says, Ein limchut b'mekilim. There are people who are lenient. Okay, so leave them be. And that way you'll use the term, he uses this beautiful term, let them have blissful ignorance. But if you're knowledgeable, the Rebbe says you cannot be mekel, even a Tzarech Gadol, you can't ask a goy to do a melacha deraisa. So plugging in a hot plate is a melacha deraisa. The cholent is cooked already. It's just to keep it hot. The issue is not the cooking of the cholent. The problem is plugging in that hot plate means that inside the hot plate there are wires, and those wires turn red hot. You don't see them, but if you would open up the hot plate, you'd see those, like inside a kettle, the element of a kettle. Inside the element, there's a rod which becomes red hot, and to do that is creating a fire. A red hot fire, a red hot rod is according to the Alter Rebbe, at least in the Yom Tov, that's called Eish Min HaTorah, and therefore, okay, unless you want to go on to other opinions who say that it's not a fire, but according to Opsher, that red hot rod is considered fire. Okay. Right. We have here now a very interesting question. A young lad has become more Shomer Torah mitzvahs, and he wants to keep kosher. Baruch Hashem, his parents are not necessarily on the same speed, but they are agreeable to make their kitchen kosher. Wealthy family, got lots of expensive china, and so now they are also helps. You'll see in a moment they are Sephardic origin. Generally, when you come in to do kashering a kitchen, and the china, all the earthenware, take the view it cannot be kashered. So someone had told them that there's a room for leniency, perhaps, and let's go through this. First of all, there is this principle which says in the Gemara, the Torah testifies that the earthenware will not release its whatever is absorbed, it will never totally release it. There is a shitta, the same itur I mentioned before, the Sefer itur. He says that's only if you do it once. If you do it 3 times, it's going to work even for earthenware. We don't paskin like this. But in the case where people have got expensive china and they are loath to get rid of it, so this is a very popular psak that we will tell them to wait for a year, because the Chacham Tzvi, who lived about 300 something years ago, he takes the view that if dishes are left for more than a year, the flavor which is in the dish is completely gone. It's complete, and therefore he says after a year there's nothing to worry about. Again, we don't paskin like Chacham Tzvi, but we'll combine the two. So again, when someone's got expensive china and they're loath to give it away or to throw it away, so what we tell them is leave it for a year, and after a year we'll kasher it 3 times, and so we'll combine the itur, the Chacham Tzvi. That's the general psak. I don't know how often that happens, but that is one option, a well-known option. Now, where does the itur come in la halacha is the following. Bishul akum. The halacha is that bishul akum, you can kasher kli cheres. That's brought in Shulchan Aruch Simon Kuf Yud Gimel, that bishul akum, because ein lo ikir min haTorah, it's got no, it's a pure drabonon. It's got no ikir min haTorah to it. Therefore, you can, if there's a person had bishul akum in earthenware dishes, you can kasher them 3 times. We'll rely on the itur, and you can kasher them. So here's the question. I understand that you can't kasher kli cheres which absorbed chazer. Here I got a kli cheres which on Sunday it was used for meat. On Tuesday it was used for milk. Does it have any issur in it? Is there a issur inside this kelim? You all are, I'm sure, familiar that after 24 hours, the taste becomes called Eine Ben Yom, it's called Tam Pogum. So if you ask me, fried knishes, cheese knishes in a fleshike pan, so one of the things I'll ask you, the first thing, when was the last time you used it for meat? If you use this knish, the pan on Friday, and now tonight you use it on Friday for meat, and tonight you warmed up knishes, so I'll tell you, slap yourself on the wrist, but the knishes are kosher, but the frying pan you're going to have to kasher. Why do you have to kasher it? Why do you have to kasher this frying pan? The knishes are kosher. Why do you have to kasher the frying pan? And the answer is that an Einoi Ben Yoimoi is also to use or to Ben Yoimoi. You're not allowed to use an old dish, an old belia, because you might come to use it when it's fresh. But here, in the case where the milk was separate and the meat was separate, in 2 separate days, so there's no issue in the dish. If I will now use it, the food will be kosher in any case, because it's a ben yoimoy. So, is there room to be makel to kasher such a dish? This is the question. So now here we have from the Ben Ish Chai, and that's why I said it was a Sephardic family. So Ben Ish Chai is certainly a reliable posuk for Sephardim. Ashkenazim, you have to see whether Ashkenazim follow that psak. So he goes through this discussion about this keli im kisa hakdena, and then he says if you cover the dish with meat with a milky plate, it becomes also, and you cannot use that dish neither for meat to milk, and you have to do hagola, which is kashering. And then he says, if it's kli cheres, if it's earthenware, you cannot. There's nothing to do. You have to give it to a goy or whatever. Then he says, if it's not meat but chicken, and there's hefsed merubah, if you have to get rid of those dishes to sell it to a goy, it's going to be a significant loss. So chicken, because it's Issa Rabbanon, then one can be more lenient. Then he goes also to say, and he says, you should do Hagolah 3 times. Then he says also, if it is Kli Sheni, you can also be Mekel. So just to sum up what's being said over here. If it's mamish meat of beef, which was cooked here, and the same dish was used for cheese, and it's Kli Rishon, then you cannot kasher it. If it was only used for chicken, or if it's klisheni, which is in the case of usually the crockery in the house, would largely be the issue. It's not so much the klirishin, it's more the serving dishes, which are all klisheni. So then one could rely on the Ben Ish Chai to do a kashering 3 times. Why not in the case when it's a klirishin and it's bosa and cholof, there's no isser here. So the answer is the following. I said before that you're not allowed to use the Einoi Ben Yomer, you might come to use the Ben Yomer. This frying pan, which you used on Friday for meat, and tonight you use it for knishes, for cheese knishes. In a day from now, it's going to be Einoi Ben Yomer for both. What would happen if you fried onions? You may be familiar that dover charif, a sharp food, takes the old or rancid flavor and makes it fresh. So you cannot say it's totally safe from Issa Deraisa. It's not true. Even though the meat is Eine Ben Yoimoi and the milk is Eine Ben Yoimoi, but it is possible to bring it back to life through a dover charif. At any rate, that's certainly the halacha, that if it was a klirishin, if it was a kli cheres, which is a klirishin for meat and for milk, even though at separate days, you wouldn't be able to kasher it. Whereas if it was chicken or a klisheni, you have room to be mekel. Let's move on. Okay, so I have a member of family in Eretz Yisrael now, and the question comes up. If you said, now Eretz Yisrael are going to switch to Talamotor on Wednesday. So what happens if someone said Talamotor in davening the day after Sukkot, the day after Isru Chag? Now, the reason why Talamotor, the switchover, is delayed until Zayin Cheshvan, as we are familiar, is because it's a time for rain, right? It's Sukkot time, but or certainly after Sukkot. But in order not to pray for rain when they are the pilgrims who are on their way back to their homes after coming to Yerushalayim for Yom Tov, so to give enough time for them to get home, so there's 15 days or till Zayin Cheshvan, and that's so that they should be able to get back home. So really, there's nothing wrong in asking for rain now, but it's delayed because of this reason. So now, if you said Talamota now, are you Yotze or not? Do you have to daven again? So here, I mentioned the Sefer before a few times. The Sefer Shir is Miyovin, and it's all about mistakes in davening, etc. So, no surprises here. He says, in Eretz Yisrael, he said Talamota right after Sukkot, before Zayin Cheshvan. So some say you don't have to daven again because really nothing really wrong in it. Others say that you do have to. Now the question is going to become more for us after Zayin Cheshvan. Why are we waiting for asking Talamotor till the 5th of December? It won't do any harm if we have rain now. I'm not complaining though. I like the weather, but why are we waiting so long? So they explain in Shulchan Aruch that outside Eretz Yisrael we're following Bovel, the needs of Bovel, whatever the reason may be. But that's the minig. Even in the southern hemisphere, they're also following Bovel, and Bovel only needs rain 60 days after the Tkufa, and that works out the 5th of December. Let's not go into the detail of that. The halacha is, if next week, if this Friday, if I had said Talamotar, I don't have to repeat the davening, because really England needs rain now. It's appropriate, it's nothing wrong. It's just England is waiting for Bovel. But really, b'diavad, I wouldn't have to repeat the davening. But let's take a look over here. The Alter Rebbe's Lashon. V'hu hadin im barotzes halol elu to hayochid v'shur al motor mizayin b'macheshvin v'eilach eine mechuyev la'aseh. If after zayin macheshvin, then you don't have to repeat. And you said to Talam motor, you don't have to repeat. Yeah. But before zayin macheshvin, you would have to repeat. You had the argument, it's not a klola, it's only because of the oily regolim. Nishke Cheshvan. Now the Alter Rebbe seems to take the stricter view that until Zayin Cheshvan, despite the explanations and the justifications, it's still considered premature, and you would have to repeat the Shemona Esrei. Once Zayin Cheshvan, then you don't have to repeat. Now, on a practical question now, let's talk about people traveling. Meanwhile, the borders are open for people of Eretz Yisrael to come to Chutz La'aretz. Some people can go back, can go to Eretz Yisrael. What's the rules now? So the rule here is, if someone from Eretz Yisrael came out of Eretz Yisrael before Marchesh, before Zayin Marchesh. In other words, he came tonight, last week, and here comes Zayin Marchesh. So he says, well, if I'd been at Israel, I'd start saying Talamotar. But now I'm in London. What do I do now? So there's a lot of discussion about this, but this is certainly one path in the poskim. And that is that it comes Zayin Macheshvan. So then he needs to have rain because he's got a garden and he's got a field in Israel. All right, so that's a personal need. It's not a communal need. It's a personal need. So communal needs are addressed in the bracha of Baruch Hashonim. A personal need should be addressed in Shemei Tefillah. Therefore, this person who is here he's here now, will come. What did I say? Will come Wednesday. So on Wednesday you start saying Talamotor where in Shemei Tefillah. Say Talamotor Rocha, Ki Ata Shemei Tefillah. If he left Eretz Yisrael after he already started, after the switchover, then he just continues in a quiet Shemon Esrei. We're not talking about a Chazan. In his quiet Shemon Esrei, he will continue saying V'sein Talamotor in the place where, in Baruch Hashanim. What about the other way around? If we, from Chutz La'aretz, will visit Eretz Yisrael, whilst we're there, we should say Talamotor in Birchas Hashonim like the people there, because that's the need of that place. But then when we come back to Chutz La'aretz, we will stop and only resume on the 5th of December. Yeah, right. Let's go. I think that was the last question. Oh no, we have one more question on the list, and then there's no slide for that. Oh, it is. It is here. Yeah, good. Right. So someone had bought some Sforim online, and he paid by credit card, but didn't receive the goods. He called up, tried to get through to the vendor, to no avail. Can he call up the credit company and ask for a refund, or is that some type of mesira? So the answer is that the term mesira, explaining this idea, mesira means that you're causing, let's take a look over here. This is from the Alter Rebbe in Niske Moment, not to cause harm to a fellow, and even the Dibur, if there's someone who wants to run away, he wants to get away from paying a debt because he can't afford to pay the debt, and he's worried he will get arrested if he stays around. He's not allowed to divulge his presence where he is. And it says, it's not called a Moser. He's not called a Moser. Look at this. If he does divulge where this person is hiding, it's not called a Moser. Moser means you're bringing upon the person a punishment which is beyond what is liable min haTorah. That's called mesira. If the person owes money, or he owes money, Torah does not say he has to sit in prison. If you are going to cause him that he has to pay what he owes, that's not called mesira. Mesira is causing greater damage or greater punishment beyond what the Torah would punish or oblige this person. Right, and here there's a note of the Alter Rebbe in the Alter Rebbe's Shulchan Aruch. He quotes here, and this is the editor fills in that you are allowed to testify on behalf of a goy in a goyish court to oblige a Jew to pay that which he is owing, where there's an element of Chilul Hashem. So coming back, when this person asked me about making calling the credit card company, what's the consequences if you didn't deliver the goods? So the credit card company will, all right, they'll say that there's no punishment there. Okay, they say that you didn't deliver. All right, it might, if he does it many times, probably will cause himself trouble. But on the one-off occasion, I don't see any punishment here. And therefore, I didn't see any chashash of Mesira. I just wanted to clarify this is the concept of Mesira. Then when you're going to, if you're causing another Yid to suffer more than he would, al pi halacha, that was where the Indian of Mesira comes in. But otherwise, he's allowed to ask for a refund, and that would be acceptable. All right, we'll start with that and wish you all a gute Woche and a freilichen Tamid.
Ja,